Dustin Baker, VikesNow, is back after a 10-day hiatus. I was on vacation with family, traveled the Northwest, West, and back home to South Dakota. It was a marvelous time. And I did miss 10 days worth of Vikings events, so the purpose of this show is to recap the stuff that this show missed, and then perhaps I'll extrapolate on individual items later in the week, depending on the news that hits for the Vikings. So I have about 7 things that I'm going to go over with the group. Newsworthy items for the most part. The first was the big announcement that we won't have a kicker competition anymore. In May, Gabe Burkich from Oklahoma, a rookie, was signed by Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Supposed to have a kicker competition all throughout the summer, push Joseph to the limit, may the best man win. Well, that kicker battle lasted about 1 month, and it is over at mandatory minicamp, which I'll touch on here in about 5 minutes. They saw enough from Gabe and said, no thanks. We're going with Greg Joseph, who had a redemptive story last year. If I had this show at the end of week 2, and we recorded that Monday after the Cardinals game, you wouldn't have liked Joseph very much, and rightfully so. But as a reclamation experiment in the 2021 season, he ended up being a pretty damn good kicker, especially for Viking standards. He had a big leg, 7 for 9 at 50 yards or more. I think the Vikings finished 13th in the NFL in field goal kicking accuracy. So the major takeaway is that the Gabe Burkich signing from May, 3-year deal, minimal guaranteed cash attached, didn't mean a damn thing. They ended up going with Joseph. Gabe didn't have it at the mandatory minicamp that lasted 2 days, and unless they sign Michael Badgley or Sam Ficken, the Vikings really won't have a kicker competition this summer. It won't exist. All right, so kicker battle. Kaput, we know beyond the shadow of a doubt, unless something funky happens, that Greg Joseph is the kicker, for better or for worse. I'd be interested to see how you guys feel about that. The next item was the prognosis from Colin Cowherd on Fox Sports Radio that said that the Vikings were going to double their win total, which implies that they're going to be a 16-win team. And that made headlines because nobody at all has forecasted the Vikings going 16-1, Kevin O'Connell's maiden voyage. But here's the deal. Here's what I think happened. He was Cowherd in that segment was talking about the Chargers, how he's high on them, and then he said the Vikings, and he's like, and I expect them to double their win total. I think he thought that they were like 6-11, because then if you double that, you get about a 12-5 record, which a decent, doable prediction for these Vikings. I think in the heat of the moment, he didn't realize they were 8-9. He just saw Kirk Cousins attached to the roster and thought, oh yeah, they were 6-10 or 6-11 or 7-10. And his bold prognostication was that they would double 6 or 7 wins and therefore be a playoff team and probably a division winner there. I think if you cornered him and said, do you really think the Vikings are a 16-1 team? He would laugh and say, no, I misspoke. Because let's face it, the Vikings are not a 16-1 team. The teams that do that throughout history are like the Joe Montana type teams that are stacked from top to bottom, the 2007 Patriots that went undefeated. And not to rain on anybody's parade, but these Vikings aren't that. Unless there's some sort of majesty and magic that I can't see right now from a summer June bird's eye view. The Vikings ceiling, if everything goes really well, is probably 13-4. 16-1 ain't happening. But it was newsworthy because, Cowherd has a big following and, sometimes says the bombastic stuff. And he hit us with a purple one here. All right, so kicker battle done. Cowherd says 16 wins for your Vikings. After that, Riley Reiff. He was the Vikings left tackle for a handful of years. He went to visit with the New York Jets, where if signed, he would presumably be a backup tackle behind George Fant and Meaty Becton. I never know if I say that right. Forgive me. But yeah, Reiff was awesome for the Vikings. He was one of their shining lights via pass protection on the offensive line for a few years. He went to the Bengals last year and was injured down the stretch and did not get to personally play in the playoffs or the Super Bowl. Bummer for him. But Reiff's a good tackle and he's not crazy old, so he could sign on with the Jets or a different team. But I touched on that one because he did play for the Vikings from 2017 to 2020, so it's a little bit newsworthy. After that, and I'll probably end up doing a whole show on this topic, depending on how the rest of the week goes for news events. But mandatory minicamp lasted 2 days, and we had some dribblings come out of that are, I think, notable. The first is Kellen Mond is going to get, which I've said before, an honest-to-goodness shot to win the backup quarterback job. And that is important because we need to know what we have with Mond in the event this Cousins experiment goes badly. Because you might already have the successor there. If the guy can't win a QB2 job, he's not going to be the successor. However, with the Zimmer regime, we learned in the last, 3 weeks, that when Mond's pick came up, Rick Spielman wanted him, reportedly, and Zimmer wanted the defensive player. That should surprise nobody. That's how it works for a defensive-minded coach. But when Spielman says, the hell was with you, I'm taking Kellen Mond, Kellen Mond was unfortunately blackballed and deprived of a QB2 job because the coach apparently just had a grudge and, took his ball and went home when it came to depth chart seating and placement. But the major takeaway on the Mond stuff is that this summer you're going to figure out if he's the real deal in the sense that he can win a QB2 job. Because if he can't oust Sean Mannion, then Mond will not amount to anything. He must do that this summer in order to provide a trajectory of being any good. Because we know Mond is 8 times faster than Sean Mannion. I think his arm's better, and it was just flummoxing that they wanted nothing to do with Mond last year, because it's not like this guy is an undrafted free agent or a 7th rounder. He's a 3rd-round pick that should reasonably win a QB2 job. So it's noteworthy that he's going to get an honest-to-goodness fair shake to win it. The next, I thought the most intriguing thing about mandatory minicamp was the offensive line stuff. So I've told you guys for 2 months, ever since Ed Ingram was drafted, that the starting right guard will probably be Ed Ingram. He better be. He's a 2nd rounder, or Chris Reed. He's got an impressive Pro Football Focus resume. Well, wouldn't you know it, bada bing, Jesse Davis is the guy getting the RG snaps in Egan mandatory minicamp. So what the hell do I know? Maybe it's Davis after all. We shall see. Ingram hasn't signed his contract yet, and I just don't think they're putting him on the field as a starting right tackle. He'll have to earn that. But what I thought was Ingram or Reed's job has suddenly morphed, at least for a little bit, into Jesse Davis's RG job. And on the center aspect, Garrett Bradbury, that is more of an open competition that was led on in the previous months. When Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell came aboard, they said the positive coach speak, fond things about Garrett Bradbury that, we like what we have in Bradbury. We don't want to see the 5th year of him, but we like what we have. And when the rubber hit the road at June minicamp, it felt like it was more of an open battle thing. So which is good, because Bradbury needs to be pushed to the limit to figure out if he can fix his pass protection with an offense-first regime. But that is the big takeaway, that it doesn't feel like Bradbury's job is absolutely secure. He has to earn it this summer. Going into it, he's a 1st-rounder, for Christ's sake. You thought, okay, he's probably going to get a chance to unlock his best self with Kevin O'Connell. But that is not a foregone conclusion, and that was a big news driblet in my opinion. Also at camp, Ihmir Smith-Marsette is indeed hurt, so it'll be something for you to monitor for the next 6 weeks to figure out when July training camps start, if Ihmir Smith-Marsette is there, or if it's something that is more detrimental, and we've been slow-rolled injury news once again. I think he'll be fine, but you never know for sure. And then also on training camp, like I said, I'll probably talk more about, not training camp, mandatory minicamp. Danielle Hunter looks like he'll have no problems acclimating to a 3-4. Doesn't surprise very many of us, but all of the positivity about him was coming out of mandatory minicamp, and it was especially cool because he didn't hold out. You'll remember 3 months ago we were talking about, will they trade him? They're going to give him a big raise. They're going to cut him. There's some dude that thought that they would cut Hunter. I remember laughing at that. But all of that is vanquished, and Hunter is there in attendance. And in fact, there aren't any notable contract holdouts or any disharmony at Vikings training camp aside from the Ed Ingram thing, which I'm sure will be hashed out. But that's a big thing because you have this, we're still in the honeymoon phase of Kwesi and Kevin, and then everybody was basically there at mandatory minicamp, and we didn't have any bullshit that said, oh yeah, so-and-so going to show up, or is he pissed about his contract? Because there is some of that in the NFL. All right, mandatory minicamp behind us. I want to touch on Chad Beebe. He was number 1 in your hearts, WR3, WR4 type for the Mike Zimmer version of the Vikings. He don't work here anymore. He's going to play for the Houston Texans, who have a shitty wide receiving core. I challenge you before the next show to go on to ESPN.com or OurLads.com. Look at the Texans depth chart and have a good laugh with me because the Texans wide receivers are unbecoming of a 2022 NFL franchise. They just don't have enough firepower, especially for a guy like Davis Mills, who nobody knows if he's going to be real good or if they're stubbornly clinging to the hope that he could be. But Beebe, he'll get a chance to win a roster spot there. They'll probably carry 6 wide receivers into the 53-man roster. And who knows, maybe Beebe will win the job there. But I'm glad that he's gone because he was a half-measured solution of trying to find a WR3 for the Vikings. It was the Zimmer way of doing things, the defense first. And I don't have anything personal against Chad Beebe. I just don't think that he's a WR3. I think he's a WR5 that plays a little bit of special teams. And I know you liked him because he has extreme Adam Thielen energy, and he's the son of Don Beebe, which fans just absolutely love sons of former players. So all the best to Beebe. Let's see if he latches on in Houston and gets a job. But he does not play for the Vikings anymore. He's been a free agent since March, and Minnesota did not bring him back, signaling the end of the Beebe era, as small and minute as it was. Rounding out the show, Chris Boyd, in a tell-all interview, I think it was on Patrick Peterson's show, said that Mike Zimmer had a tight asshole, that when you made a mistake, it was the end of the world inside the Zimmer regime, and this is the latest installment of all the horror stories that have come out after Zimmer was fired, because what do? We pile on somebody after they get terminated. It doesn't surprise me one bit that culture, especially when they're losing, was callous, not fun. It's the Parcells way. This is the tree, the coaching tree that Zimmer came from. And when you're winning, you champion it as, disciplined football team. And when you're losing, you go point out all of the weird grudges that the coach had and his tight asshole and all that stuff. So it was time to move on for Zimmer. There's no doubt about it. The product had grown stale. The defense-first coach couldn't foster a good defense, so why the hell even bother employing a defense-first coach in this day and age? But the Chris Boyd's little asshole chat confirmed what we knew. Zimmer was a prick at times. He wasn't sunshine and rainbows. Nobody ever thought he was. When you're winning, that's fine. When you're losing, slander. And then lastly, the Vikings signed Jonathan Bullard from the Falcons, who I think can play inside the defensive line as well, if needed, on the outside of the defensive line. So he'll be another face to watch among Patrick Jones, Janarius Robinson, Julian Taylor, all of those guys, DJ Wanham, all of the ones that are vying to be the backup solutions to Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith. Jonathan Bullard, right as I was going on vacation, was tossed into the mix as another name. And he's actually played significant time in the NFL, played with the Bears too. I don't know if he'll start. I don't know enough about him, and the stats are just kind of meh. But who knows? It's a Donatel guy. Donatel was the defensive backs coach when Bullard was in Chicago on their defensive line. So that's it. The kicker battle competition done. Didn't go into August or September. That bitch is over right away. Colin Cowherd thinks the Vikings are going to win 16 games. This guy does not. Riley Reif, our old pal, visiting the Jets, hopefully catches on somewhere else. Mandatory minicamp. Kellen Mond gets an honest-to-goodness shake. The offensive line battles took a little bit more shape in almost a twist. Amir Smith-Marset is indeed hurt. Neil Hunter looks fabulous in a 3-4. Shocking, I know. Chad Beebe is not coming back to the Vikings. He's playing for the Houston Texans. Chris Boyd isn't a fan of Zimmer. Go figure. And then Jonathan Bullard was onboarded to these Vikings to potentially win a roster spot in September. I'll be back all this week. I don't have another vacation until July. I will bring more Vikings content tomorrow, and Skol, baby.